Welcome back to The Line. I'm Megan Kamrick, sitting in this week for Gene Grant. President-elect Donald Trump wants Betsy DeVos to be his education secretary. DeVos is a strong supporter of school choice and voucher programs. Many education advocates are concerned about what her nomination signals for education priorities in the new administration. Harry, do you think a change in national education priorities could have a dramatic impact here in New Mexico?
It could have a dramatic impact, but I'm not sure if that's really going to be a terribly positive impact. Let's go back to the whole issue of vouchers. So President-elect Trump has talked about a $20 billion federal program for vouchers, but the estimates are that it would require $110 billion from the states. Now, Senator Smith has said, well, we really don't have the money for that sort of thing. But also, if we think about vouchers as just one example, they may work well in the cities, but we are a very rural state. So where would vouchers actually work? Would it be for online schools? Will those really have an enormous set of problems? Yeah. So there could be an awful lot that would change under a Trump administration. Certainly Common Core may be under threat. There may be an attempt to move to vouchers, but it's really a question of where the money is going to come from at the federal level and then at the state level. But I also think the DeVos nomination sends a really important signal related to the priority of public education in the context of school choice and other things for Donald Trump.
You know, Dee Dee, we have a high rate of poverty here, especially for children, and educators are saying that has a significant impact on educational outcomes. Do you think it's possible to change schools and see results without addressing that very large underlying reality?
Well, one of the prospects for the new education secretary is the elimination of Title I, which would be a disaster for New Mexico. Title I is for poor children, programs in schools, remedial programs, school lunch programs. I think it's 70 or 80% of our students in New Mexico qualify for free lunches. And that just shows you that your point about how many of our students are poverty level students. We have I think it's the second or first highest level of child poverty in New Mexico than any state. And in some of the states where they do have vouchers, and there are very few that have vouchers, I think there are 13 nationwide where according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, and
sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Go ahead.
No, there are only 13, and 7 of those apply only to disabled children. The others may be for low-income students, but I'm not sure. I think it just speaks, though, of the reluctance of state legislators nationwide to go with any voucher program. And in New Mexico, that was certainly true under Governor Gary Johnson, who pushed school vouchers very hard, and the legislator was not responsive at all.
You know, Mary, she brings up other states. There was an article in the Santa Fe New Mexican this week looking at possibilities of what will happen with education under a Trump presidency. They talked about vouchers in Ohio, but people have touted this as a way to get better results. But there was a study done in that state that did not find that was true.
Exactly, and that's what's happened. And I think that one of the issues with charter schools is that there's no oversight from the state as to exactly what's being taught. And that, I think, is what the problem is with voucher schools, with charter schools, with vouchers and charter schools, is we're going to have 2 different sets of students being educated, but not any kind of a standard for our students.
But they all take the same standardized tests, right?
I don't know if they do that in the charter schools because it's a different thing. Okay. It is. It does vary by state, and so I think that's a big problem.
And yet, Dan, we got the school ratings this week, and Albuquerque and Santa Fe got D ratings for their schools. Basically, that's a summary of all the schools in the district. So this is after we've had a number of years of reform efforts under the Martinez administration. I think people feel like they're looking for solutions or answers, or how do we do this differently and get better results?
I think it's interesting the conversation you guys were having, and I know I'll be the lone wolf at this deal. The answer seems to be well, if the educrats don't believe it's going to work, then well, it won't
Who are
work.
the educrats?
You know, it's the folks that are in the education system, right? It's the folks that are
So they're
superintendents
bureaucrats
of schools,
and-
the
okay.
bureaucrats, the folks that are, you know, they've been in this, they've been entrenched in this, and they're what people are failing to realize is they're part of the problem. Their inability to look outside. You know, in New Mexico, when we passed charter schools, it was fought repeatedly. The only reason it came around is because there was a late push with some effort by the Governor Johnston and his staff to get vouchers into Mexico, and people were coming over. So I think at the end of the day, vouchers, there's many examples of vouchers having worked in places like Milwaukee, in places in other areas around the country, where I think at the end of the day, if we take the education decisions away from the educrats and put them in the hands of parents, we'll get a lot of these things addressed. I think it's unfair to say that President Trump wants to do away with the Title I stuff. That's the Washington Post's idea of what they may do if they take over. He has not said, I'm doing away with Title I
Well, I think
money.
they're looking at
That's what-
DeVos's
well,
record.
Right, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and where the money is going to come from.
That's right,
for
but I
that,
think it's
which would be
unfair
from
to say, as Dee Dee said, hey, President Trump's going to make it so all these poor kids can't eat anymore, can't go to school anymore. That's not what was said. And so I think that what you're going to see now, and we also got to remember, we're having this conversation about Donald Trump, who during the campaign, what did he say about the Department of Education?
He wants to get rid
He's
of it.
going to get rid of it.
Well, all the Republicans always say that.
Well, but I don't think that's a bad idea,
Okay.
because I think these decisions should be made at the state level, not the federal level. We're getting these decisions. You cannot sit at this table and tell me educating a kid in Washington, D.C. is the same as educating a kid in Cloudcroft, New Mexico. Completely different. Completely different needs, completely different.
But you need to still have standardized standards so that we know that our students, no matter where they go, can be educated and are prepared to have a job and
And we've got
to
those
support
standards now, and we're
themselves.
getting our teeth kicked in by third world countries. So the only people that are making these decisions, that have set these standards for the last 25, 30, 40, 50 years, we are now at the bottom of every list, not only in the state, but nationally when we compete on a global level. We are not doing it at the levels we need to do it. And you're not going to change it if you don't think outside the box.
There seems to be everybody wants this to be better, wants our
Right.
kids to be better
Of
educated.
course, yeah. There's no
The devil's in the
anti-education
details,
lobby,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think about what Dan's saying? And we need at least to have a kid in Cloudcroft and a kid in
Right.
DC both need to know whatever, fill in the spot,
Right.
quantum mechanics or
I think
or
it's
calculus.
a little bit overstated to say that kids in DC are completely different from kids in Cloudcroft, and I don't think Dan is saying that. You do need to adjust to local conditions and circumstances, so it's a really delicate balance. On the one hand, as Mary points out, you do need to have some basic standards in terms of how kids are ready either for the job market if they don't go on to college or onto secondary or tertiary education. And there's a lot of evidence, and I think Dan is right to point that out, that our kids are way behind relative to kids in a lot of other countries. So we certainly have to look at that at the standards level, but we also have to look at the evidence that we have right now. And the evidence that we have right now on things like school choice, on vouchers, first of all, vouchers don't cover full
Right.
tuition in pretty much any place.
So the families still have to come up with money.
The families still have to come up with money, so it's a choice, but a choice for who? It would be a choice for middle class families, but if you're a poor family, it's probably not really going to be a choice that works. We've got to look really at where the evidence is. We've got to be honest with ourselves about where the education system is. And if we were going to make vouchers work for school choice, then it would have to be an apples-to-apples sort of thing. We still have to hold them accountable to standards. We still have to look at the quality of education. But if it's school choice, then it's got to be a real voucher that would let even a poor family pay full tuition.
You know, Dee Dee, there was, I believe it was this year, a national meeting of the community schools movement, and that has a lot of traction here, right, in New Mexico with this idea of, especially because we have such a large percentage of kids in poverty, that you're wrapping around services and other supports to the families, to the kids within the school to facilitate learning. And it seems to be a model that shows a lot of promise.
Those are
and
those public school models.
Yes, they
that
are.
You're
They
talking
are public
about.
school models.
That's not what's being discussed here. What's being discussed here is supporting private schools with vouchers, and then charter schools. which I think are a whole different kettle of fish than vouchers. Now, I'm a supporter of charter schools. We have 100 charter schools here in New Mexico. And of course they're all different. The online ones, there's serious questions about them. But there are some that are really innovative and are carrying forward the original mission of charter schools, which is to experiment and find out what works for certain
Well, this is it. What works
populations.
is like, why? How do we, instead of this has become very partisan in education, how do we focus on what works?
I think you have to realize, and you have to start from the premise that we have to look outside the box. We can't constantly come to the table and say we want to have education reform, but only these three people are going to have input, and these three organizations are
Well, how
going
do
to
we
get
get
what
through
they
that?
want.
We have models that we know work. Why
but
can't we put those
because
forward?
because we don't have models that we know work. We have models that individuals will say this one works. We have models out here that others say will work. You know, you offer up a study from Ohio, but we have studies, repeated studies from the city of Milwaukee that say vouchers has been a smashing success in Milwaukee with the poorest of the poor, the most disenfranchised.
Although
and
that's
yet-
a
and
major
yet-
urban
I understand
center,
that,
yeah.
but you look at New Mexico. Let me let you in on a secret. Cloudcroft doesn't have a bad school system. Capitan doesn't have a bad school system. If you look at the schools that are failing in New Mexico, they're the major urban areas where there's not this ability to take care of themselves from within the community. And so at the end of the day, we have examples. We have examples right now where Harry talks about vouchers don't cover the cost. That's not necessarily true. What's happening is, yes, if you say today we're going to give you $10,000 a year in a voucher to go to go to Albuquerque Academy, $4,000 today. Albuquerque Academy is going to say, well, we charge $20,000. But we know that during voucher testimony, we had the nuns came from the Catholic school system and said, if you guys pass vouchers, we'd open up 25 Catholic schools in this state immediately. We would take whatever you gave us, and we'd be able to educate kids in some of the poorest, smallest communities that are out there. And at the end of the day, we have this conversation about reform, but we constantly are excluding the most important people in the reform conversation, the parents.
Mary.
Public school vouchers for Catholic schools, for any kind of a religious school, that is just a violation of separation of church
There's no
and
such thing as
state.
separation of church and state. There's no such thing. It's not written anywhere.
It's the
thought it was-
First Amendment. It's the First
It doesn't
Amendment.
say that. It does not
It's-
say that at all.
it-
It says the government will not impose a religion on you. It doesn't say we can't give you
I think
your
it's been held up by
tax dollars.
case
It's-
law.
it's
No, it hasn't. It
massive.
has not been held up by
Dan, I
case
beg to differ with you. It's massive case law on that.
Completely false. That vouchers are not the government giving
Anyway,
money to people.
that's the issue. I think that's what the issue is with vouchers, is that we can't have public taxpayer money.
It's my
going-
money. It's the taxpayers' money. It's not your money of the
It
government.
is public
It's
taxpayer.
not. You're giving back the person the money that they pay in taxes.
It is
That's the conversation that people disagree
public
on.
money that is going to a private parochial school. That is a separation, that's a violation of church and state. That's a violation of what this country is founded
It's not
on.
even true. Notre Dame, we give student loans to kids that go to Notre Dame. That's public money that goes to the schools. They get it today. So, but everybody has to have the conversation about
We
it.
have to agree to disagree on
I'll
this.
give Mary
We
final.
can have different opinions. We can't have different facts. That's
Okay, let me take
She's
Donna
got
out of the
the facts.
conversation just for a moment.
Briefly.
The one thing we haven't really talked about is vocational education. There's such a focus on preparing people for college, and that's really important too. But there are lots and lots of jobs in today's economy that require good vocational education, including two-year schools. That really doesn't get talked about as much as it should.
That's true. Well, we'll have to, that's all we have time for at that moment, but I'm sure we'll be revisiting this topic often. In a moment, we'll talk about the state of the local economy in Albuquerque and how people are reacting to a string of fires set at chain businesses. This fall, students from the New Mexico Newsport helped us cover the 2016 elections. This week, they asked UNM students to share their thoughts on one point in President-elect Donald Trump's plan for his first months in office.